So, why do you think O'Brien chooses to start the first chapter by listing the extensive amount of things that the men carried during the war? And this is chapter 1.
Okay. I think he does that so you can see how much they actually had to carry and how it wasn't easy to carry all that. The physical or things they have to carry, like the physical weight, was almost as much as the emotional weight they had to carry. They really like that.
Yeah, I agree with Allison. I think that's what they did, to show, not only the tangible things, but the intangible things, and how hard it was, and how difficult it was to balance them, and how hard it was to actually be able to focus while you were carrying those intangible things.
And by listing all of the things that they carried, it made it seem like you were actually there with them and felt the pain that they went through.
So, I found a quote in the book that I feel kind of goes with this. So, it says, it was on page 14 in case you want to look at it. It says, they carried the land itself, Vietnam, the place, the soil. A powdery orange-red dust that covered their boots and fatigues and faces. They carried the sky, the whole atmosphere. They carried it. The humidity, the monsoons, the stink of fungus and decay, all of it. They carried gravity. So I thought that kind of showed, even further the weight that they carried, because it wasn't only small things like their equipment or even emotional things, but they felt the weight of everything around them, even the land, something so simple and consistent as that. Everywhere they go, there's land that never really stops being there, so it weighed on them a lot.
Going along with that, I have a question. Do you think the things the men carried define them as individuals? If so, why? Or if not, why?
I would say yes, because they all had their own personal items that they carried. As one had a thumb, I don't know if that defines him as a person, but one had his girlfriend's stockings, and they all just had their own things that had emotional value to them.
I would agree with that. Yeah, they all had the things they all had. They had very similar things, but each of them carried the extra weight to have something that was close to them and reminded them of home.
Yeah, I think that they do kind of define them as individuals because not only physical things they carry define them, but the emotional things that we were carrying also define them.
I think for Jimmy Cross, he was kind of it seemed like it was being told from his point of view for a little bit. His obsession with Martha was a little bit of gave us an insight into who he was, and I thought that was a little bit weird, and I think that kind of shows what he prioritizes because he talked about, I think it was Ted Lavender. He said if it wasn't for his obsession with Martha, that he might not be dead, and he just talked about his guilt about that, and I thought that kind of defined his priorities.
Then going with that, you could tell he was really obsessed with her because he had carried the stone in his mouth that she gave him, and then they also had the pictures that he detailedly described and looked at constantly.
I had a quote from page 27. It was in chapter 2. For a while he stared down at the photograph, his eyes very bright. Then he struggled and said, "Well, I did. I burned it. After Lavender died, I couldn't. This is a new one. Martha gave it to me herself." So he burned the photograph, and then he got another one from Martha when he saw her again. And I was like, and a question is, what are the appeals that he used towards Lavender after he died?
I think that he appeals for the reader. He uses pathos, kind of makes them feel sad with him for what he did and for how everything played out with that whole situation.
I agree with Gianna. I think that he does use pathos because he's trying to get to the reader about how he feels through that process of everything happening.
One of my journal entries was kind of about Ted Lavender. It's about like when he died. It's a short quote, but it's like cement because when he fell, they said that he fell like cement, and it's figurative language. But I think that he uses that short quote to establish pathos in kind of a way because you can imagine just a bag of cement falling and that being Ted Lavender, and you can feel his process pain on how he felt for Ted Lavender.
And that's like similar there. Yeah, they're comparing his body and how it fell and what it was like fall through stuff.
I think he does use a lot of imagery throughout it to show, like you said with the bag of cement, to show like what really happened. Like he wants you to feel like you're there. He describes things quite thoroughly to give you like the full effect of it.
And going along with like everything Pauline was saying, I have another question. So far from reading the book, has your understanding of like war expanded?
I would say yes because he explains the things that they've gone through and the struggles, and it's like you're actually there because you can see how he describes everything, like what they're wearing, what they're carrying. So I'd say yes.
I would say yes too because like you have like a deeper understanding and like you feel for the people who went through this more with knowing like the things they carried physically and emotionally and everything they went through.
I would also say yeah, because like it teaches you more about the war itself. But this book also goes pretty in depth on what they did besides just fighting and killing each other. Gives you more of what they do on the free time.
I think it like explains most on like death and like how they're actually feeling about it. Because one journal entry that I do have is there were numerous such poses. Some carried themselves with a sort of wistful organization, others with pride or stiff solitary, discipline or good humor or macho zeal. They were afraid of dying, but they were even more afraid to show it. I was on page 19. But I think it like shows like how afraid like the soldiers really are, and yeah, they're brave, but they also like have feelings, and they're normal people too, and like even though they're at war, it doesn't mean that they can't be afraid.
And there was a part in the book where they talked about how the biggest, hardest part of being a soldier was blushing or showing your fear. When they were all afraid, they couldn't show it.
I think that's a silly thing to be afraid of when you're surrounded by guns and dying people.
I say a few of them like to show their emotions, but not in the right way. Because like instead of showing like the good ones, they show like anger and hatred and all that. It's like on page 35, it says, or Ted Lavender adopting an orphan puppy, feeding it from a plastic spoon and carrying it in his rucksack, until the day Azar strapped it to a Claymore anti-personal mine and squeezed the firing device. And like they should like go towards more of the bad things. I feel like they were scared, so it led them to do things to violent things not. So I had a question. Why would the author choose to tell about the gruesome things he and his fellow soldiers did, even though it would make others judge him?
Because it wouldn't be a true war story if you didn't talk about all the gruesome things that happened too, along with just the winnings.
Because I almost think they'd be too ashamed to tell what they did.
I think they want people to know because like they want them to understand what they went through.
Well, my uncle like just recently had like a fundraiser from for war heroes that come. So like they'll be at like a gym for like 24 hours, and they'll just like do workouts named after soldiers. But they do that to like release all the anger. So like they don't tell people because they're like once they like tell people they relive the story. So they just like work through it like their own ways. So they just come to the gym for 24 hours and they do like a workout or whatever. And they just like ease everything that they have seen just so they can like go away from it. So they don't.
So sorry. With the puppy, they also mentioned, I don't really remember what kind of animal. It might have been like, it was a bigger animal, but they were, I think it was rat. Kylie was like shooting it and just basically like ripping it apart in so many different ways just to take out his anger for the death of one of their friends. And I think that just shows like how deeply they were affected by the things that happened to them and how much war really just messed with their heads. Like I don't think a normal person would just walk up and say, "Let me just like torture this animal." Well, like and it I think it lived almost the whole time that it was being tortured, and to me that's just inhumane, and it's I can't even imagine somebody wanting to do that and like using that to express their anger, I guess. It seems a little extreme.
Wasn't it because like his friend died or something, and it was like this is how he decided to take out his anger?
Yeah, he just kept like.
And he wouldn't kill it. He was just
No, he wouldn't-
torturing.
I remember it said like
Shoot
the
his
lip
body
was
parts out.
hanging or something. I
Yeah.
don't remember what page it was, but to me that stood out just because of how.
Age
I think he
75,
wanted
awful.
something else to feel pain, like he was feeling,
Yeah.
which
He was feeling
doesn't make
emotional
sense to
pain.
me. But
And the animal didn't keep showing you the pain. It said it just stood there
It
with his
just-
eyes
yeah.
blank. So that's why he kept going, because he wasn't getting any satisfaction from it.
And I mean, like Faith said, most of them do need to find release. I guess that's about the way I would go. But it doesn't help to hold it in. It kind of just makes it worse and lets the anger fester and grow. So they need to define their ways, and I think he included those parts, even though they were extremely graphic. I think he included them just to emphasize like what they really had to go through. If you keep out the darkest parts, then it doesn't really show what went on, I guess.
So, it says this thing, true war story is never moral. If a story seems moral, do not believe it. If at the end of the war story you feel uplifted, or you feel that some small bit of rectitude has been salvaged from the larger waste, then you have been made the victim of a very old and terrible lie. So it basically says if there's morals to the story, it's not true. So why do those soldiers tell these stories? How do you know if like they're true or not? Because like you can find almost a moral in anything. So
I know he talked a lot about them exaggerating with their stories, but I think they do that again just to show like the reality of it. Even though they are exaggerating, you can't really feel what war is like unless you've been there. So they're just trying to like make it a little bit more than what it actually is, so maybe you can feel what it was like.
One of my journal entries was, on occasion, the war was like a ping pong ball. You could put a fancy spin on it, you can make it dance. Which I view like the monotonous back and forth of a ping pong ball. But when you add different details or talk about harder parts, it moves differently. And it expresses a lot more than just.
So one of my questions I had is on page 37, the beginning of chapter 4. So why would O'Brien include a story in his book that he says he's never told anyone, not even his wife? And this story was when he went to the hotel with the old man, I think.
Like when he like ran away.
Yeah, he was afraid of the war, so basically he ran away to a cabin with this old man, or a hotel. Why do you think he would tell us that when he had never even told his wife?
I think he told us that because he is writing a war story, and I think he's like trying to make it less exaggerating. He's trying to tell all the truths that he went through and every like obstacle that he had to overcome, and just to show like every soldier now and then may regret going into war, may not want to go into war.
And I also think it's his part of grieving. He would write it all down and he would get it out of his mind and he can have other people learn about the war. And a question I had was, how does the trip up north affect his decision of going to war and what was the tone towards war?
I think so. He was like trying to run away from a war because he didn't want to go. He feared going to war, but I think he accepted the fact that there's no way out of it, that would leave shame to his family basically if he kept hiding and didn't go. And I think he finally understood that. He's like, I got no other choice but to go, so he went back.
I think it's also because when he was up north, he met Elroy, and he was the man that he stayed with in the cabin. In the chapter, he says that Elroy is the hero of his life. So I feel like he had to write about it because that Elroy had such a big impact on him. And one of my questions was why does he feel this way, or in what ways is Elroy the hero? Which I'm gonna answer my own question. I feel like he's the hero because he didn't judge him for running away from the war. He didn't bring it up to him. He just let him know that he knew what he was doing, and he brought him on different trips that made him really think about what he was running from and why he was running from it. Which in the end made him realize that he needed to go to war.
I think Elroy played a very important role, especially in that chapter, because he did all that he did without ever addressing the issue. He knew what was going on, whether he knew the full truth or just that O'Brien was trying to get away from something. He knew, but he never said anything about it, but in that way, he did more than he could have with words. He taught him an important lesson, and he assisted him in making the right decision, I think, instead of running away from his problems. Elroy kind of pushed him to face them and go back to his home to do what he was enlisted to do.
So when he goes back to his home, I have a quote. I passed through towns with familiar names, through pine forests and down to the prairie and then to Vietnam, where I was a soldier, and then home again. I survived, but it was not a happy ending. I was a coward. I went to war. And the question I have going along with that quote is, in your opinion, was O'Brien a coward? Why?
I don't think he was. I mean, it's okay to be afraid of war. Not everybody. Yeah, it's not something you look forward to.
I think he only looked at himself as a coward because he gave in to going into war even though he didn't want to, because he didn't want to go to war and he tried hiding from it, but he ended up going because he only went because he didn't want to be embarrassed. He didn't want all of the town laughing at him and making jokes about it further on.
One of my quotes was, there were occasions, I believe, when a nation was justified in using military force to achieve its ends, to stop a Hitler or some comparable evil, and I told myself that in such a circumstance I would have willingly marched off to battle. So I think it's not that he was just afraid of war, because he would have gone if it had been a problem. I think he just didn't agree with the Vietnam War. And from there, he had to,
So it's like he didn't believe that we were fighting for a good cause.
Yeah, he didn't see a purpose to it. It was just kind of. He was unfortunate enough to get enlisted into this war. And. yeah. I don't remember what I was saying.
He was lucky, it was unlucky that he was forced to go, but he was also one of the lucky ones that made it home. Because, for personal connection, and my grandma's brother, he was enlisted to go to Vietnam, but he got blown up and wasn't able to come home. So the author was one of the lucky ones that was not living.
I have an uncle. I think he's my great uncle. But I found out just the other day, actually, that he fought in the Vietnam War and he got his leg taken off, but he was fortunately able to come home. And then, so with what Faith said about him being a coward, I don't think he is. And you did say that everybody would be afraid of war. It's not something that you say, yay, I get to fight in the war. And he came back ultimately, so I think that shows that he wasn't really a coward. He needed a moment to think and to really reflect on what was going on and to consider his options. And ultimately, he came back and he did what he was supposed to do. Whether he made some mistakes on the road, on the way there or not, I don't think so. And I mean, it takes guts to write about it too, to basically relive the whole thing and just say this is what happened and open up to everybody that would read your book.
I think anybody would need that time to reflect and think about what they're going into. So, like, I completely understand why he did that.
It's not an easy task to accept it or come to terms with it, especially for the family to know that you're gonna go away. You don't know if you're gonna come back alive or in one piece or not. All you know is that you kind of have to do it and just hope for the best.
I think that a bunch of them that did go to war were like, they knew what physically if they might not come back or they might be injured or something like that. But I don't think any of them were prepared for the mental scars that left on going to war and what they did.
So I have a quote kind of to go with that and like the scars that were left. So on page 36, to end the chapter, he says, 43 years old and the war occurred half a lifetime ago, and yet the remembering makes it now. And sometimes remembering will lead to a story which makes it forever. That's what stories are for. Stories are for joining the past to the future. Stories are for those late nights in the night when you can't remember how you got from where you were to where you are. Stories are for eternity, when memory is erased, when there's nothing to remember except the story. So he writes this kind of telling us why he's writing, and that he wrote this so people would never really forget what they had to go through. And again, it takes guts to write about this kind of stuff and to be this real and raw and just open. So I thought that was a really good quote for his purpose in writing.
I actually have the same quote as Gianna, just like narrowed down like a little more. And I've reflected on it, and I thought that he like used this quote to like show that the memories, the horrors, sadness, and pain are always going to be there, and he wants people to like know the story, and that actions matter, and that war isn't just going to be one thing and go away. It's always going to stay there because it's a story, and people remember stories. Even though like if it diminishes over time, they're going to remember like the important parts of the story and like what happened and how they felt when it happened.
What does the author mean when he says that a true war story is never about war?
Sorry.
What does the author mean when he says that a true war story is never about war?
I think he means like it's about like how they feel, like and what they go through. It's not really like about like the war itself, but like their journey leading up to the war and like what they do before, how they prepare, not necessarily the war itself.
Yeah, so like how many people they killed and all that. That doesn't matter. That's not what makes it a war story. It's more of what led up to it and the things it did.
I agree with what Allison said. It's not about, again, how many people were killed, how many people survived, all those kinds of things, like the statistical things that kind of dehumanize it. It's more about the emotional parts of it that kind of like make you realize the truths of war and that kind of give a more impactful story, I guess, if you dig deeper into it. Because you could easily say, yeah, it took place here and this many people were killed and all that kind of thing. And it's not, that just tells you about it, but it's a very surface level description. So you want to get into more what the soldiers felt, what they went through, and that kind of thing to really get a true war story.
I have a question. So, has your guys' opinion of the author changed at all throughout the story? Like, do you have like a deeper, I don't know, connection to him? Yeah.
My opinion really hasn't changed because like I knew about a lot. My brother was big into the Vietnam War, so I knew a lot of stuff they did. So like what they did and all that hasn't really changed anything because I already kind of knew about it roughly. But
Yeah, same thing. My uncles went to war, and I've heard like stuff from them and how they felt and like what they go through sometimes on a day-to-day basis. So it hasn't really changed. It just opened up just a little bit more, but not that much.
I don't really have any family members that went to war, but after hearing his story, I can have a better understanding of what they've gone through.
I personally think that he sounds like a very good man for what he's done. He, going back to Elroy, you said was his name. So he ended up coming back to fight in the war, even though he did not want to do it at all, and he was so scared of it that he wanted to run away, and he went so far as to go, I think, up to the border. I don't know if he crossed or not, but he went up to the border. And then he's like, you know what, I'm going to turn around. So I think, again, that takes bravery and a dedication to your country to willingly go, somewhat willingly go to potentially lose your life just to fight for what you believe or what you have to fight for, I guess.
So we talk about war changes people, and in the chapter titled "Sweetheart of the Sanctuary," we hear Rat Kiley's story about Marianne and how she changed. What do you think made her change?
I think she didn't fully understand what was all going on, but when she got there, she realized it needed help, so she started helping, and then she got so invested in it. She went as far to become one of the Greens,
I think so.
and became like almost a full-on soldier.
She was. Go ahead.
Okay. I have a quote from her in that chapter. It says, when I'm out there at night, I feel close to my own body. I can feel my blood moving, my skin and my fingernails, everything. It's like I'm full of electricity and I'm glowing in the dark. I'm on fire almost. I'm burning away into nothing, but it doesn't matter because I know exactly who I am. You can't feel like that anywhere else. So I think her being out there, it like helped her to find herself, and that's what changed her, I believe.
Vietnam to her was very like enticing and entrancing, and her boyfriend asked her like, are you sure you don't want to go home? And she's like, yeah, I want to stay, I really like it here. Not those exact words, obviously. But I also had a quote from that, and it says, it's on page 109. It said, what happened to her, Rat said, was what happened to all of them. You come over clean and you get dirty, and then afterward it's never the same. Some make it intact, some don't make it at all. For Marianne Bell, it seemed Vietnam had the effect of a powerful drug. That mix of unnamed terror and unnamed pleasure that comes as the needle slips in, and you know you're risking something. The endorphins start to flow, and the adrenaline, and you hold your breath and creep quietly through the moonlit nightscapes. You become intimate with danger. You're in touch with the far side of yourself, as though it's another hemisphere, and you want to string it out and go wherever the trip takes you and be host to all the possibilities inside yourself. So, kind of like what you said, she felt maybe not at home, but she felt like herself. She found herself when she was there with the greenies, and when she was, I don't know what she was doing with them, where she was like hiding in the dark, and what she kind of found what she thought she was meant to do, and she really did change. Like when it said she had the necklace of tongues, and she came there, when she first came, we had like an impression that she was like a sweet little innocent thing, and then in the end she's like singing in foreign tones, and she's got dried tongues around her neck, and I thought that was just kind of, again, a little much.
I find it kind of strange though, like when she first got there, she had like her sweater and her skirt and all that, but then she changed to wearing like army stuff and that. But then when she finally comes back with the tongue, she's back wearing the cute little sweater and skirt, and so she looks innocent, but you still have the cute tongue there.
It's not necessarily what she was wearing always. It was just she changed mentally so much that she was a completely different person. Like multiple times, she changed so much, and it was kind of hard to read just to see how hurt her boyfriend was that had happened to her. Like he brought her here thinking, this is so good for us. Like we're gonna get married, we're gonna live together for the rest of our lives, and then she goes a little cuckoo. I don't know that that's really gonna work out anymore, but I thought that was sad.
Yeah, and I think he felt a lot of that blame on himself because he brought her there. So I don't think that helped.
He was pretty still. I didn't plan on like being with her till about the end.
Yeah.
He still planned on taking her until she came up with the human tongues. And I think it was like when Rat said, "You're deaf, man. She's too far gone." Something like that.
So, did you have anything else?
No.
Okay. So my last question was, why did O'Brien choose to write the story that Rat Kiley had told him about Mary Ann Bell, a woman who O'Brien had never even met? Because this was that story, or that chapter was about Mary Ann Bell, but from Rat Kiley. I don't think O'Brien ever met her, but he still chose to include the story. So why do you think he chose that?
I think he chose to include it to show how much a person can change. Like even if like you're not in the war, it can still change you and make you have different beliefs and make you want to do different things. And all that.
I think it was a little bit ironic, maybe, that he told us his story about how he ran away from the war, but this girl came in and she wasn't enlisted to fight the war. She didn't have to do any of it. She was really just there to keep her boyfriend company, so they weren't missing each other too much. But then she knowingly chose to become a part of it, I guess, a bigger part than what was ever intended.
I think it was more also just like, because most of the stories he witnessed, I think it was just to give the whole book something a little different from not his point of view.
I think it was to show, like, kind of like what Faith said, like, it doesn't only change the soldiers, it can take a toll on the family, anybody else who is around them. War is just tough. It's hard for everybody. Does anybody have any questions? We've got 5 more minutes that we can talk a little bit.
We could debrief if we're done.
Has everybody asked all their questions?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sure. Okay. So on like the title page in the book, it says this a work of fiction by Tim O'Brien. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like,
Oh, it does.
yeah. It says a work of fiction by Tim O'Brien, but we are reading this book as a nonfiction. So why do you think we're doing that?
My mind's low.
Yeah.
Stumped you all.
Well, maybe because of like the thing in like the book, it says a true war story is never true. So he's just trying to tell you that some of this is embellished. So he's not considering it as a nonfiction.
And of course, you can't prove Mary Ann's story because it's from Rat.
That's kind of what I was thinking, is because you can't necessarily prove what you saw. I mean, he knows what he saw, regardless of whether he told us what he actually saw, or if he's like, yeah, like, they blew up and it was like everywhere. Like, I got on my clip. Like, you know, you don't know if that actually happened. You don't know if Ted Lavender really did pump himself up with tranquilizers just for the heck of it. Like, we have no way of proving that, but I think we still call it a memoir because with those you never really know if they're true or not, especially with I don't remember which book it was, but I think it was like My Story, Elizabeth Smart's book maybe, that she said they found was a little embellished. So you never know. You always just kind of hope that they wouldn't lie to you and like.
Well, even if it was like a little embellished, that's one thing. Like no
Right.
nonfiction is going to be completely nonfiction.
Right.
You don't remember everything exact detail.
Especially a war story.
Yeah, but there's got to be like enough so it's considered fiction. 'Cause, like even when you look it up, it says it's a psychological fiction. A lot.
Yeah.
But
Did you guys notice that like the first chapter is kind of told in like third person?
Yeah, the
and
third
then
chapter
the
seems
rest
for a
is-
while. I
Yeah.
thought it was Jimmy Cross, I think. I thought that's
Yeah.
whose point of view it was, especially from the first chapter, because that was a lot about like him and Martha. And then the second chapter, I'm reading and I'm like, me? Who's me?
Yeah, I know. It switched from like third person to first
Yeah.
person.
I
So
didn't
I
notice that.
was wondering why they did that. I don't know.
I mean, so I think every chapter is first person except for the first and the one that's Rat's story.
Mhm.
The rest are all his
I think
view.
I think the first one might be like that, just to emphasize that like he wasn't the one that carried all the weight. It was to show that like every single one of the soldiers was weighed down by essentially everything. It said that they carried everything they found that they possibly could. So just to show that literally every single soldier was carrying an immense weight. Does anybody else have questions before we debrief? Okay. I think if everybody did ask all the questions that we were supposed to, I think everybody did pretty good.
Yeah.
There was a lot of. Go ahead.
There
was a
wasn't
lot
very
of-
much interrupting until now.
There was a lot of like insights, and I feel like this is kind of a hard thing to like personally connect to. Like, I completely forgot that my uncle had ever fought in the war until just now, so I didn't really think I was gonna be able to have a personal connection because not everybody, like Mariah said, not everybody has family that's been in the war. So I think that would be a harder part of this. But I think for the most part, if we could connect, we did. So I think we did really good with that.
I think we all almost had the same amount of talking too. You know,
I think we were very good with that too.
contribute about you.
And I think we used our evidence well and we put it well in the discussion and we didn't just randomly bring it up.
I think we asked a lot of questions too. Like last time, we just stated our opinion and we didn't like ask a specific question.
I think it was good that she had us have
I
questions
think
written
that
down
was really good.
because we were more prepared. And like last discussion, I didn't ask any questions. I actually asked questions this time. So
A lot of us had questions that kind of tied together. So like, I think I asked my question, and then we all kind of talked about that, and then Faith said, and to follow up with that, then she asked her question. So it was really good with that, where we had maybe not similar questions, but questions that kind of had to do with the same topic, so we could ask them one after the other and further the discussion on certain topics. And I thought that was really good.
I think this discussion was almost easier because like we're all going towards one book, so you're all roughly pretty close. The problem with the last discussion, there are so many different views you can get from.
yeah.
Here, you're pretty much almost all towards the same thing.
This one it was easier.
Yeah.
Sorry. This one it was easier to state your evidence too, because we all have the same thing. So like, you could ask your question, and my evidence is from the same book that you're kind of taking your question from. So then you can tie it together easier, I guess. Because with the other one, everybody had different sources, different topics, different questions. So it was a little bit harder to tie things together and do that kind of thing.
Yeah, the first one I ended up not using a lot of my questions because they just didn't work with what everyone else had.
Yeah.
That was my problem. Everyone had roughly the same view, and then mine was completely different. So it's like there's not much I can really put without completely sidetracking the conversation.
Does anybody else have anything to say?
Good discussion.
Good job. Are we good?
Yeah.